Fiona threw the single canvas bag onto the wet gravel of the driveway. Rain soaked through Alistair's cheap jacket within seconds. Behind his mother-in-law, the grand stone pillars of the Sterling family estate loomed like a fortress. Imogen stood in the doorway, staring down at her fingernails, refusing to meet his eyes. "You've overstayed your welcome, Alistair," Fiona said, her voice dripping with venom. "A secondary school teacher doesn't belong in a family of our standing. Imogen deserves a man who builds empires, not one who grades geography homework." Dominic, her father, stepped out next, lighting a cigar with casual cruelty. He laughed, a low rumble that made Alistair's jaw tighten with cold anger. They had used him for 3 years, letting him nurse Dominic through a stroke, treating him like an unpaid servant while their shipping empire secretly faltered. Now that Dominic was healthy, Alistair was garbage to be discarded. Alistair didn't argue. He picked up his bag, looking past the older couple straight at his wife. She simply turned her back and walked inside. They thought they were destroying a pauper. Alistair feels the sting of betrayal turn into a frozen, calculated focus. The humiliation burns away, leaving only a desire for absolute truth. He pulled a sleek, encrypted black smartphone from his pocket, a phone his in-laws had never seen him use. Alistair walked down the long, dark country lane, the iron gates of the estate slamming shut behind him. He pressed a single speed dial button. The phone rang once before a sharp, professional voice answered. "Sir, we've been waiting for your call. Is the theater over?" "It's over, Arthur," Alistair said, his voice entirely devoid of the meekness he had performed for 3 years. "They just threw me out. Fiona thinks I'm sleeping at a train station tonight. Send the car to the end of the lane." For 3 years, Alistair had hidden his true identity under a mountain of paperwork and a quiet teaching job. He wasn't a poor orphan. He was the sole heir to Apex Global, a multi-billion-pound distressed debt acquisition firm. He had married Imogen for love, hiding his wealth to ensure her feelings were real. But her family's arrogance had corrupted her completely. A matte black Mercedes pulled up to the curb, its headlights cutting through the British mist. Arthur, his chief legal advisor, stepped out and opened the rear door. The transition from a humiliated outcast back to a powerful billionaire shifts Alistair's grief into ruthless determination. "Show me the files on Sterling Logistics," Alistair ordered as the door clicked shut. Inside the leather-trimmed cabin of the Mercedes, Alistair reviewed the glowing tablet Arthur handed him. While the Sterling family wore tailored suits and threw lavish charity galas, their business was a hollow shell. They had spent the last decade bleeding money, covering their tracks with bad loans. "They are drowning, sir," Arthur explained, tapping the screen. Dominic took out massive high-interest loans from a private syndicate in Zurich to keep their shipping fleet afloat. They owe exactly $30 million. The note is due in 14 days. Alistair looked at the names on the loan documents. Fiona and Dominic had personally guaranteed the debt with everything they owned. The estate, their vehicles, their family heirlooms, and every share of Sterling Logistics were tied to this single, toxic liability. If the lender called in a loan, the family would be completely destitute. They had treated Alistair like a parasite while sitting on a financial landmine. He stared at the signature of the Swiss bank holding the debt. It was a subsidiary that Apex Global had been negotiating to buy for months. Alistair realizes the sheer hypocrisy of his in-laws, moving from disgust to a sharp, clinical focus on their financial vulnerability. "Tell the Swiss office to finalize the acquisition tonight," Alistair murmured. "I want that specific debt portfolio on my desk by morning." By 9 a.m., Alistair sat in the penthouse office of Apex Global, high above the London skyline. He wore a beige-toned bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than his annual teaching salary. The rain tapped against the glass as Arthur entered, carrying a signed leather binder. "The transaction is complete, Mr. Vance," Arthur said, using Alistair's real surname. "Apex Global now owns 100% of the Swiss syndicate's assets. You are now the sole creditor for Sterling Logistics." Alistair opened the folder. There it was, $30 million of debt, personally guaranteed by Dominic and Fiona Sterling. He held their entire lives in his hands. Every arrogant comment Fiona had made at dinner, every time Dominic had forced him to clean the mud off his boots, flashed through his mind. He could demand immediate payment. They didn't have the cash. The law allowed him to seize every asset they owned with 48 hours' notice if they defaulted. But Alistair knew Dominic was slippery. He needed to watch them squander their final desperate card before he struck. Alistair experiences a profound shift from a victim of psychological abuse to the absolute master of his abuser's destiny. A notification pinged on his personal phone. It was a public social media post from Callum, Imogen's arrogant brother. Alistair looked at the photo Callum had posted. The entire Sterling family was smiling at a high-end restaurant, raising glasses of vintage champagne. The caption read, "Celebrating a massive new partnership. The empire expands. Winners stay winning." Alistair buzzed his assistant. "Find out who Callum is meeting with today." 10 minutes later, the answer arrived. Callum had approached an aggressive private equity firm called Vanguard Group, trying to sell a 40% stake in Sterling Logistics to raise the $30 million. They thought they had found a loophole to pay off the Swiss loan before the deadline. They thought they were saved. What the Sterlings didn't know was that Vanguard Group was a notorious corporate raider known for stripping companies of their assets and leaving the founders penniless. Callum, in his desperate arrogance, had walked straight into a trap just to prove the family didn't need Alistair's quiet presence. They were celebrating a deal that would ultimately destroy them anyway. Alistair feels a mixture of bitter amusement and cold satisfaction watching his former family celebrate their own financial execution. Alistair picked up his desk phone and called the managing director of Vanguard Group. Alistair Vance, the director of Vanguard, answered, his tone instantly respectful. "To what do I owe the honor? We've been trying to partner with Apex Global for 3 years. I hear you were looking at a shipping firm called Sterling Logistics," Alistair said smoothly, leaning back in his leather chair. "I want you to pull out of the deal. Pull out tomorrow morning, right before the contracts are signed." There was a brief pause on the line. "If we do that, Mr. Vance, it kills our relationship with the Sterling family. But if Apex is offering us a better asset package, I will grant your firm exclusive bidding rights on our next logistics acquisition," Alistair replied. "But the Sterlings must believe they have the funding secured until the very last second. Let them think they've won." The director didn't hesitate. "Consider it done. We will string them along until 9 o'clock tomorrow." Alistair hung up. The illusion of safety was the most dangerous place to be. Fiona and Dominic were currently sleeping soundly, believing their empire was secure, unaware that the floor beneath them was made of paper. Alistair moves past any lingering guilt, fully embracing his role as the architect of their impending financial reality check. His personal phone buzzed with a text message from Imogen. The text from his wife was short and cold. "Come to the estate at noon tomorrow to sign the divorce papers. My lawyers have drafted everything. Don't make a scene, Alistair. We are in a different league now." Alistair called her back immediately. She answered on the second ring, her voice clipped and distant. "I told you not to call me, Alistair. Mum is right. We tried, but you just don't have the drive to match my family." "Imogen, are you sure about this?" Alistair asked, keeping his voice perfectly level, mimicking the gentle schoolteacher she thought he was. "Are you sure your family's business is as secure as you think?" She laughed, a sharp, patronizing sound. "Callum just secured a massive investment. We are completely fine. In fact, we are buying 2 new yachts next month. You wouldn't understand corporate finance, Alistair. Just show up tomorrow, sign the papers, and take whatever small payout my father offers you." "I'll be there," Alistair said quietly. "I'll bring my own legal representation." "Don't waste money on a lawyer you can't afford," she snapped, before hanging up the phone. Any final shred of affection Alistair held for Imogen evaporates, replaced by the realization that she was completely molded by her parents' greed. Alistair looked at Arthur. "Prepare the foreclosure notices for 12 o'clock tomorrow." The next morning, Alistair received a surprise visitor at the Apex Global headquarters. It was Esther, the elderly chief accountant who had worked for the Sterling family for 30 years. She looked exhausted, holding a heavy manila folder. "Alistair," Esther said, staring at his massive office in bewilderment. I always knew you were hiding something, but I never expected this. I came to find Apex Global because I saw the debt transfer. I didn't know you owned it. Why are you here, Esther? Alistair asked gently, offering her a chair. Dominic fired me an hour ago, she said, her hands shaking. Because I refused to falsify the shipping logs. Callum has been committing asset fraud to make the company look profitable for Vanguard Group. They are lying about their revenue to get the investment. She pushed the folder across the desk. Inside were the genuine tax documents, showing that Sterling Logistics hadn't made a profit in 4 years. Dominic and Callum weren't just incompetent. They were criminals. They were planning to take Vanguard's money and flee the country, leaving the creditors with nothing. Alistair feels a profound wave of righteous anger as the depth of his in-laws' corruption is laid bare before him. Esther, how would you like to attend a family meeting at noon? Alistair asked with a dark smile. At 11:30 a.m., inside the grand dining room of the Sterling estate, Callum's phone buzzed. He answered it confidently, expecting the Vanguard Group director to confirm the wire transfer. Instead, his face turned completely pale. What do you mean you're out? Callum shouted, slamming his hand on the mahogany table. The contracts are ready. We're supposed to sign in 30 minutes. The deal is dead, Callum. The director's voice sounded cold over the speakerphone. We reviewed your recent filings. Or should I say, your falsified filings. Vanguard does not do business with frauds. The line went dead. Fiona dropped her teacup, the porcelain shattering against the hardwood floor. Dominic gasped for air, clutching his chest as he stared at his son. What did he say? Callum, where is the 30 million? They found out, Callum whispered, his voice trembling. They backed out. Dad, the Swiss syndicate loan is due today. If we don't pay by midnight, they take the company. They take this house. Imogen stood up, panic writing itself across her face. Call them. Ask for an extension. The Sterling family experiences an immediate shift from arrogant supremacy to sheer, unadulterated terror as their financial lifeline snaps. The heavy front oak doors of the estate swung open, echoing through the silent mansion. Alistair walked into the dining room, flanked by Arthur and 3 senior attorneys. Behind them walked Esther, holding her ledger. The Sterling family stared at Alistair, completely bewildered by his expensive suit and the security detail behind him. Alistair? Imogen stammered, taking a step back. What are you doing here? And why are you wearing that? I told you to wait for the lawyers. Fiona pointed a manicured finger at him, her face twisted in rage. Get this garbage out of my house. We are in the middle of a family crisis, you pathetic little man. We don't have time for your grocery money arguments. Dominic tried to stand, but his legs were weak. Alistair, leave before I have the security guards drag you out. You don't belong here. Alistair didn't flinch. He walked to the head of the long table, the very seat Dominic always used to dominate the room. He pulled out the heavy leather chair and sat down, crossing his legs with calm authority. Arthur placed a thick stack of legal documents right in front of him. Alistair feels the incredible contrast of returning to the room where he was humiliated, now holding absolute power over his abusers. Actually, Dominic, Alistair said smoothly, you don't have security guards anymore. I cancelled their contract 10 minutes ago. What nonsense are you talking about? Callum sneered, stepping toward Alistair. You're a schoolteacher. You live on biscuits and tea. Who are these people? Arthur stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. My name is Arthur Pendleton, Chief Legal Counsel for Apex Global. My client, Mr. Alistair Vance, is the sole owner of the debt portfolio previously held by the Zurich Credit Syndicate. The room seemed to lose its oxygen. Dominic sank back into his chair, his eyes wide. Apex Global? That's a multi-billion-pound fund. You can't be Alistair Vance. He's an orphan. I am an orphan, Dominic, Alistair said, his voice cold and precise. But my grandfather founded the firm. I chose to live simply because I wanted to see who people really were when they thought I had nothing. And I saw exactly who you are. Cruel, arrogant thieves. Imogen stared at her husband, her mouth opening and closing without sound. The man she had treated like a disappointing accessory was the very billionaire her father had spent months trying to secure a meeting with. The Sterling family faces the crushing realization that their salvation and their destruction are the exact same person. Alistair slid a single piece of paper across the table to Fiona. Fiona picked up the paper with trembling fingers. Her eyes scanned the bold red lettering at the top. Notice of immediate debt recall and asset seizure. This says, $30 million, Fiona whispered, her voice cracking. You're calling in the loan. Today. The terms of the Swiss syndicate allow for immediate recall if there is evidence of corporate fraud, Alistair explained, nodding toward Esther. Esther was kind enough to provide the genuine logs. You lied about your shipping metrics to inflate your company value. That constitutes a material breach of contract. Alistair, please, Imogen cried, rushing to his side, trying to place a hand on his shoulder. We are married. We are a family. You can't do this to us. Let's talk about this privately. I love you, you know that. Alistair stood up, stepping away from her touch. You didn't love me when you watched your mother throw my clothes into the mud yesterday, Imogen. You didn't love me when you told me I was in a different league. You are right, though. We are in different leagues. Alistair rejects Imogen's desperate, fake affection, feeling a clean, sharp sense of closure as he cuts her out of his life. Dominic gripped the edge of the table, his face gray. If you foreclose, we lose everything. That is exactly the point, Alistair said. By noon tomorrow, bailiffs will arrive to inventory this house. Every painting, every piece of silver, and every vehicle registered to Sterling Logistics belongs to Apex Global. You have 24 hours to pack your things. You can't leave us homeless. Fiona shrieked, tears finally ruining her heavy makeup. We built this family name. We are the Starlings. You built a house of cards on a foundation of cruelty, Alistair replied, his voice echoing in the grand room. And Callum, I've already forwarded Esther's original ledgers to the serious fraud office. I believe they will be waiting for you at your London apartment. Callum dropped into a chair, his face completely devoid of color, realizing his freedom was coming to a rapid end. The high society life they had used to look down on everyone else was disappearing in real time. Dominic could only look at the floor, completely broken by the son-in-law he had despised. The utter destruction of the Sterling family's arrogance brings a deep, quiet sense of justice to the room. Alistair turned toward the door, but Imogen grabbed his sleeve, begging through her tears. Alistair, please, don't do this. Imogen sobbed, dropping to her knees. I'll sign anything. I'll stay with you. We can start over. Please don't take our home. Alistair looked down at her. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the divorce papers she had sent him the previous night. He laid them on the table, took out a sleek silver pen, and signed his name with a swift, steady hand. I came to sign the papers just like you asked, Alistair said gently. Take them. You wanted a man who builds empires, Imogen. Too bad you couldn't recognize one when he was cleaning your kitchen. He handed the pen to Arthur, who packed up the files. Fiona was weeping openly now, clutching her husband's arm as Dominic stared blankly at the foreclosure notice. Their empire was gone, their reputation ruined, and their wealth entirely vanished into the hands of the man they had thrown out into the rain. Alistair feels the final remnants of his past life detach, leaving him completely unburdened by their greed and drama. Without looking back, Alistair walked out of the dining room, his boots clicking firmly against the stone floor. The afternoon sun broke through the heavy British clouds as Alistair stepped out onto the gravel driveway. The air felt clean, fresh, and free of the toxic arrogance that had choked him for 3 long years. Arthur opened the door to the Mercedes. Where to now, Mr. Vance? Alistair looked back at the grand stone pillars of the estate. Within days, it would be sold to a housing charity, transformed into something useful for people who actually needed it. He felt no hatred left in his heart, only a profound, lightweight peace. He had given them exactly what they earned. The truth. He climbed into the back seat, the door closing with a quiet, solid thud. The car pulled away, leaving the crumbling sterling legacy behind in the rearview mirror. He was no longer the schoolteacher hiding in the shadows, nor was he the victim of a wealthy family's cruelty. He was entirely his own man. Alistair experiences absolute liberation, knowing he survived the fire and emerged stronger, wealthier, and completely free. Take me back to London, Arthur. It's time to start building something that actually matters.